All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Yesterday, the Supreme Court made a terrible decision. They released their decision yesterday on birthright citizenship. They upheld the idea of birthright citizenship in this country, meaning that anybody who is born on U.S. soil is automatically a U.S. citizen and is granted the rights and privileges that come with that, just as equally as anybody whose parents were U.S. citizens and then they are born in this country. So we can, of course, draw a lot of absurd conclusions from this idea of birthright citizenship. This has been the law of the land for a long time in this country, and it has led to a lot of absurd situations. And it has really assisted in degrading what it means to be an American, what it means to be a citizen of this country, and it has helped in the degradation of our cultural cohesion, our societal cohesion, the societal fabric which this country was built upon. It has assisted in the destruction of this. And we'll talk about that today. We'll talk about why that is. And we will also have to talk about today why the Republican Party is complicit and in many ways responsible for assisting in this process of this endless downward spiral that we've taken in this country over the last 50 years when it comes to immigration and mass migration into this country and the overturning of our culture and our society in this country. The Republicans in many ways are not only complicit but responsible for this, and we'll talk about that as well today. So all this today and more on the Quest for Clarity podcast.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
Maybe we should improve the liberty of our own country before we seek to do so abroad. Some of us have paid attention to the fact that the expert class, including the foreign policy experts, lie all the time. The correct answer to this, of course, as it always is liberty. All right, everybody, before we begin, if you could please go down below this video here on YouTube and hit like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Also, if you wouldn't mind going to my Instagram, X, Spotify, and Substack and giving all of those a follow, I'd really appreciate that as well. Before we get into the analysis of this decision yesterday, I do just want to talk briefly about what birthright citizenship actually is. Where does this idea come from? Why do we operate under this system in this country, which can obviously draw absurd conclusions? Basically, birthright citizenship was enshrined in the Constitution in the 14th Amendment, which was established after the Civil War. And there has been a radical misinterpreting of what the 14th Amendment was actually intending when it was put into the Constitution, when the Constitution was amended to add this. This was added after the Civil War and was intended to apply to the freed slaves, the African Americans, which were freed after the Civil War. It was intended so that they would become U.S. citizens. They were kind of in a legal limbo after being freed as slaves. Were they or were they not technically U.S. citizens? So this 14th Amendment was put in along with the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery in this country. The 14th Amendment followed directly after that to say that these people who were just freed are now citizens of the United States. That is what it was actually intended to be, and it has been extrapolated, this idea that anybody who is born here as a U.S. citizen is now, it's been extrapolated to apply to immigration, and that anybody who comes into this country illegally and has a kid, that kid is now a U.S. citizen. So that has led to a lot of problematic situations in this country. Some of the biggest ones include foreign spies. There's been a series of incidents where, for example, Chinese spies or Chinese ambassadors will come to this country and operate for work as foreigners, and they will have kids in this country. And then when that kid goes back to China and grows up, that kid is now a U.S. citizen because he was born in America. He has all the rights of a U.S. citizen, and he has every right to come back to our country and potentially operate as a spy on behalf of the Chinese government because his family was spies. This is the problem that is created. It's not only China, it's Russia, other countries as well. This has created a massive problem, a national security issue, and moreover, back with the illegal immigration discussion, it's created a cultural issue. We've let in, over the last 50, really since 1965, the Hart-Celler Act, and 1990, the Immigration Act, the last 50, 60 years in this country has seen a radical shift in what this country is. The culture of this country, the makeup of this country. people from all over the world have been allowed to flood into our country from third world countries and radically change what this country is, radically change the social cohesion of this country. And partially responsible for that is the idea of birthright citizenship, that illegal immigrants led into this country, the 10 million plus under Joe Biden, the tens of millions before that, over the decades before that are in this country. If they have children, which many of them have, those children are automatically U.S. citizens. And that, in a sense, kind of traps the entire family here of illegal immigrants, because now we've created this scene where in order to deport the family, you have to separate the child from the family, and the child's a U.S. citizen, and now it's ripping mothers from their children. This is the crisis we saw under Donald Trump's first term with the kids in cages situation. This is the problem, that this whole bureaucracy of immigration corruption really is what it is. Corruption. We'll explain that a bit later. This bureaucracy of all these regulations and all this craziness has led to our country being flooded with third world migrants, and it's upending communities around this country. So we'll get into that a bit later. That's just a little preview for a bit later. But first, I just want to touch on this Supreme Court case itself, because it's also very important to understand how the Republicans, specifically the Republicans over the last decade, have been utterly complicit and partially responsible for this issue of, and now in this case, birthright citizenship being upheld, for this issue being worsened. Things have not gotten better since 2016. For anyone who's really confused on that, despite the rhetoric of the Republican Party changing on this issue in the last 10 years since Trump came down the golden escalator, things have not actually materially changed. They have materially worsened on this issue. And that's something people forget, because the Overton window has shifted, or things have changed rhetorically. Now we have Stephen Miller in the White House giving these speeches on Fox News, these really hardcore speeches, restricted immigration. In reality, things have worsened. We've had like 15 million illegal immigrants come into the country since Trump's first term. And yet we're supposed to believe that things are radically better now, even though we haven't even deported 1 million people since Trump got back in. Anyways, we'll get to that in a bit. This is the Supreme Court case. And Trump's Supreme Court picks are now the ones utterly stabbing America in the back with this. But we'll get to that here. This is the New York Times. It says, quote, "The Supreme Court on Tuesday struck down President Trump's executive order limiting birthright citizenship, reaffirming the long-held principle that the Constitution guarantees that nearly all children born on U.S. soil are citizens. The ruling, which was 6-3 to strike down the president's executive order, was a severe blow to a policy pursued by Mr. Trump for more than a decade to prevent babies from undocumented immigrants and temporary foreign residents from automatically becoming Americans. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, explained that President Trump's executive order violated a right enshrined in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Children born in the United States to undocumented parents or to parents temporarily in the country, he wrote, are citizens at birth. Quote, citizenship then and now was the right to have rights, to freely participate in our political community, Chief Justice Roberts wrote. Quote, the framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every free-born person in this land. He added that, quote, we keep that promise today. The Chief Justice was joined in upholding birthright citizenship by the court's 3 liberal justices, along with 2 fellow conservatives, Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh. Isn't that beautiful? These 2 Trump-appointed justices are now utterly stabbing all of us in the back. Those who backed them, they're utterly stabbing us in the back and are instead siding with the liberals on the court. We'll get back to the failures of the Republicans in a bit, because that's very important to understanding the broader history here. But back to the issue of birthright citizenship, it is utterly absurd that anybody born in this country, regardless of whether their parents are citizens or not, is a U.S. citizen. This creates so many absurd situations that you'd have to defend in order to support this. That would mean that anybody who's here as a tourist, who's visiting this country, if they're 9 months pregnant, visit the country, give birth, that kid's now a U.S. citizen? In what sense? In what sense is that kid a U.S. citizen? That would mean that citizenship literally means absolutely nothing, if that's the case. It means nothing. It means literally nothing to be a U.S. citizen if that's what we're arguing for. That anybody who comes here as a tourist while they're 9 months pregnant gives birth to a child, and now that child can just freely become a U.S. citizen? Obviously, this creates a terrible incentive structure where that child can now, if we're dealing again with the issue of spies from China, for example, a Chinese spy can come here, give birth to a child, and then that child can go back to China, become a spy working for the government, and then come back here as an adult, and they're a U.S. citizen. They have no allegiance to this country, no loyalty to this country at all, but they have every single right and every single privilege that comes with being a U.S. citizen, all the same as me or you, whose parents are U.S. citizens, whose parents lived here, and who has allegiance to this country. That there's something obviously very unnatural and wrong about this. Somebody who has no ties to our country or our society or our culture can just come in here because they happen to be born on the soil. What exactly ties them to us in any real sense? In what sense are they a citizen, part of our country here, part of our nation? In what sense is this a nation of consent of the people who within it, a nation by consent? In what sense do the people of this country have a choice into who becomes a citizen in any real way? The idea that location is the only thing that constitutes a citizenship or any real bond between people is the location is to ignore everything that makes life the way it is. Sorry, that's something that people don't like to accept. What makes people bonded together is a shared experience, a shared history, a shared culture, a shared society, shared norms. These are things that link people together and create nations of people. You get nations of people because they believe in the same things, they have the same norms, they have the same society. Life is somewhat similar. There is a similar broad view of morality, of values, of what is right and what is wrong. That's how you get a nation that lasts and is connected and has a bond between people. Somebody who happens to be born here and then goes and moves back for 20 more years to live their life in some country that is illiberal, doesn't have our same moralities, doesn't have our same values, and then is expected to just be allowed completely without any restriction to come back to this country. Okay, one person does that. What if thousands of people do that? What if hundreds of thousands of people do that? What if millions do that? Is that the way to run a society? Is that beneficial to the people of this country? Is that beneficial to the societal cohesion of a country, of a nation? In what sense? We can feel virtuous as we just slowly degrade what this country is. We can feel nice and liberal as we slowly degrade the cohesion of this country and the bond that ties it together. But over decades, over half a century, over a century, you destroy the very essence of the country. It doesn't make any sense. It's cultural and national suicide that we're engaged in, and we have been engaged in. Now, I would highly recommend anybody who's right-leaning or libertarian-leaning go read Nations by Consent by Murray Rothbard. It's a short little essay by Murray Rothbard where he talks about, and this is a misconception with libertarians, that they're all open borders, like third worldists. There's a strand of libertarians which are entirely correct on immigration, and in many cases even more hardline than many right-wingers on immigration. People like Murray Rothbard and Lou Rockwell and Hans Hermann Hoppe are very hardline on immigration. And here's just a little excerpt from Nations by Consent by Rothbard. It's just a phenomenal essay. It says, quote, "The nation, of course, is not the same thing as the state, a difference that early libertarians and classical liberals, such as Ludwig von Mises and Albert J. Nock, understood well. Contemporary libertarians often assume, mistakenly, that individuals are bound to each other by only the nexus of market exchange. They forget that everybody is necessarily born into a family, a language, and a culture. Every person is born into one or several overlapping communities, usually including an ethnic group with specific values, cultures, religious beliefs, and traditions. He is generally born into a country. He is always born into a specific historical context of time and place, meaning neighborhood and land area." So this is the essence of what creates a nation. It is a bond over shared history, shared culture, shared values. That is what creates a nation. If we are to basically build up our country based on more people, we just got to get everyone in here. We have to are based on the virtue that more people from the third world is better, that we're all expected to kind of be connected through this loose agreement that like bigotry is wrong or something. That's what's going to bind all of us together and create a cohesive nation. Just this shared agreement that liberalism is good and wokeness is virtuous. Like, this is kind of really flimsy and basically plastic, artificial worldview that can't stand up that can't stand the test of time. These aren't things. These are a phase. We've already seen wokeness die down. We're supposed to bring these people in who don't share our liberal values in this country. They don't share our same vision of morality. They couldn't explain. Many of them could not explain to you why it was necessary for people to fight and die for the freedom of speech, for example, or the freedom to bear arms, the Second Amendment, many of them can't explain this because it's just not their culture. It's not their history. They don't have a history of this. They didn't grow up going to school and learning about figures like George Washington or the Founding Fathers or the Constitutional Conventions and the debates that went on these issues. They didn't learn about this, so they just fundamentally don't agree with it. They don't live with this history in the back of their mind. They didn't grow up in this society, so they don't value it as much, just naturally. They don't align with it as much. So we're expected to bring these millions of these people into our country who, again, don't share our history, don't share our culture. Many don't share our language. And then what? We're supposed to, through the taxpayer, pay for them to live here because what is the real reason for this? There's not like an economic benefit for everybody in the country. There's an economic benefit for a few. The real reason behind this, the motivating factor behind the liberals and the left being so in favor of this, even though it directly hurts their cause in many cases, is this suicidal empathy. This endless empathy for everyone else in the world instead of yourself. Is this endless guilt for our history? Is this endless shame in your own shadow? In ever stating clearly and confidently that your values and your morals are better than somebody else's? It's this unwillingness to do that. It's this egalitarianism that everybody and everyone's morals are equally necessary to be heard out, and we must have everybody in the world come to this country because we wouldn't want to be misconceived by them as bigoted or racist or anything like this. So we must, regardless of their morals, regardless of their values, regardless of their country's history or their country's, the historical context in which they were born, whether it be through civil war or clan conflicts in another country, we must let them come into this country and bring those values and those traditions with them. Because we are in no position, they believe, to establish our values and our morals as superior to somebody else's. And let's not mistake what I'm saying here. I'm not saying anything even close to what people label falsely racist. People label this racist, what I just said. They falsely label that racist. It's nothing even close. I did not say, and this is exactly what people will say. I said that values and morals are superior, objectively are superior to those of people across the world who were born in tribal conflicts and civil wars, who didn't have the history of these liberal thinkers like Thomas Paine or Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin or any of these people, whose society wasn't built on the ideas of those people. Our morals and our values, our societal values, which this country was built upon, are superior to those people who weren't built on these values, the societies that weren't built on these values. And people will take that, and all they will hear because of their programming, because of their good liberal programming, will hear racist, racist, racist. I don't like them because of who they are, because of who they are. They can't comprehend the nuances to what I just said. They can't comprehend that. Because of the public schooling education in this country and the teaching of everybody to always view yourself as this person in a position of privilege that must always be apologizing for yourself, because of that, you're unwilling to ever acknowledge the superiority of your culture or of your society or of the morals that you practice every day. This country, for example, we view murder as wrong. We view theft as wrong. Yet, in some of these third world countries, they don't. In many third world countries, they treat women incredibly poorly. In this country, we make it a point not to do that. Yet, for some reason, these liberals that would preach things like feminism or preach things like equal rights for all, they are somehow trapped in this idea, this loop of, on the one hand, preaching and always talking down to everybody in this country about how you need to be better, you need to be more feminist, you need to be more pro equal rights for all. They'll always be on this never-ending quest for equality of outcome in this country. Yet they don't hold those standards for anybody in any other part of the world. They actually, not only do they not hold the standards for them, and not only do they not assert their moral superiority over them, they're unwilling to do any of that, they actually want to import them into our country and increase tribalism in our country. And anybody who complains about that, anybody who complains that their morals and their values are not necessarily compatible with ours, they might even be against ours, then you're actually the one who's in the wrong. Now they're fully defending the very thing they claim to be against. It's utterly delusional. It makes no sense logically, but it's this liberalism. Liberalism, in the end, egalitarianism, it creates this false hierarchy where instead of valuing people based on their morals or their values, they instead value people based on the victimhood status of them. And therefore, we must be on the endless apology tour that can never be concluded. We must always be apologizing. And it's to the point where they must be imported. These people must be imported into our country, and we must accept the overthrowing of our culture because we must be guilty for something. Me, who's never committed a crime against these people, I must be endlessly apologizing to them. Why is that? That makes no sense. This is collectivist garbage that I am guilty for the crimes, the supposed crimes, the not even real crimes of ancestors of mine that don't even exist. But because I'm part of because you're a part of this culture of white supremacy or something, totally fake, because you're part of that, you must be endlessly allowing your culture to be destroyed by third worldists who don't share your values and don't share your morals. You must allow them to be imported into your neighborhoods and your towns and change fundamentally what they are. That is the suicide that is at the base of liberalism. And that's what we're seeing play out now. Now, if we can all acknowledge, and let's just take a moment right now with everything I just said. Let's all just take a moment, because it should be said, that racism is wrong. We can all stand here and condemn racism. There's no problem in doing that. But it would be incredibly naive, and it would just be false, to pretend that tribalism doesn't exist in this country or in any other part of the world. Tribalism exists, in many cases, on ethnic or religious lines, along ethnic or religious lines, in every other part of the country. Look at the Middle East, for example. There's the Sunnis and the Shiites, there's the Kurds, there's the Persians and the Arabs and the Palestinians. There's endless fighting based on these tribal lines. To act like that doesn't exist is to be incredibly naive and not have a three-dimensional view of the world or history. That exists. That existed in Europe, by the way, as well. That exists everywhere. That exists anywhere, everywhere, for all of time. That's been a factor in humanity forever. There's always tribal conflict. To pretend that that doesn't exist, and to simultaneously pretend that doesn't exist, and then import every possible group of people into this country, and act like that's not going to potentially have the possibility of raising the risk of tribal conflict in this country, is just wrong. Let's take a look at Minnesota, for example, or Minneapolis, to be more specific. Minneapolis had a mayor's race last year in which Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, was running against a Somali man. There was literally, you can look this up, this is true. In that mayor's race, Jacob Fry literally had to pander to one tribe of Somalis over the other. There was a clan dispute in Minneapolis from the Somali immigrants in Minneapolis, within the city of Minneapolis, of the two different clans of Somalis. There was a clan dispute. There's two rivaling clans in Somalia that now have been imported into Minneapolis in America. And now the mayor's race hinges on Jacob Fry, an American, pandering to one group of Somalis over the other, to one group of these immigrants over the other, in order to win against this Somali opponent of his in the race. I'm sorry, what is the point of this? What are we getting out of this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? This is being done to ourselves. Our politicians are doing this to us. Why? What have we gained from this situation over the last many decades? What has been gained from this? Has society become more cohesive? Have we expanded on the values of our ancestors? Have we expanded on these and made them even better and really solidified the ones that worked? Or have we seen a continuous and never ceasing degradation and erosion of our society and of our culture? Have we seen it just completely collapse? And that doesn't put it all at the feet of mass migration, but there's a lot of blame to go around here, and a lot of it goes to mass migration. The fact that many people in this country don't even speak the same language. How can you expect society to function in any natural way if the people within a society don't even speak the same language? They don't even understand the words that are being spoken by each other. How can that be expected to go on? How can you expect it not only to go on, but also for there to be no effects? That's the crazy part. They expect there to be no negative externalities of this. It's craziness. This is cultural and societal national suicide that we've been engaging in for decades at this point. Now, back to this issue of birthright citizenship. You'll notice there's a never-ending hypocrisy from the leftists on this issue. Imagine the situation. If Scots and Irishmen, people who were white, imagine if they decided to get pregnant, wait 9 months, and go to Haiti and give birth there. And imagine if Haiti had a birthright citizenship system, and the white people there, now the Irish and the Scots, decided to become Haitians. They were Haitians now, and they were going to change the rules of Haiti to make it more in their view, in their worldview, in their culture, based on their society and their values. Imagine, would the leftists not be the first people to say that's colonialism, that's wrong, you're erasing a people and a history? Would they not be the first ones to say that? Of course they would, because they have a hypocritical double standard. They're actually the ones who are bigoted and racist, because they only hold the standard to one side. They would be the first to call out the Irish and the Scottish for going to Haiti and forcing their culture and forcing their language on the Haitians, for changing Haiti from what it historically was to now changing it to Irish and Scot. They would be the first to say that. Now, if the role is reversed and people from Haiti come to Ohio, for example, and take over neighborhoods, and there's neighborhoods full of Haitians where historically Americans used to live, then the whole colonialism paradigm, that doesn't work anymore for some reason. It only works one way around. It only works when Europeans or Americans go and take over different parts of the world and establish their will on the society. It doesn't work when the oppressed people come in and take over parts of town or take over neighborhoods or take over cities and now determine mayoral elections in Minneapolis. That doesn't quite work. They don't have imagine if you and me packed up right now to go to some foreign country, we went to Somalia, and we started, a bunch of us got together a group large enough to sway the local elections of Somalia. I don't even think there are elections, but regardless, say we did that, and then we went in there and we made demands, and we had a tribal conflict. Say we had different groups of us go in there and start a tribal conflict, and the politicians there had to pander to us in order to win. And this is Somalia, by the way. It's not our country. Of course, they would view that as wrong. They would view that as colonialism. They'd view that as us overrunning their society. But when Somalis come into Minneapolis and the mayoral election is determined by tribal conflicts, by clan wars in Somalia, when the mayor of Minneapolis has to pander to one Somali clan over the other, they don't even look strangely at that. They don't even consider that weird. They actually consider that virtuous. They say, "Isn't it nice? We have this diverse array of cultures in our society. We feel really good about ourselves from our coastal cities in New York and Los Angeles, as Middle America is being completely pillaged by people who are on the taxpayer dollar. We feel really good about ourselves from our penthouses and from the Beltway and our think tanks. We feel great about this. We corporations feel great about the fact that we have cheap labor here, that we can treat as indentured servants, because if they complain about their wages or about their benefits, they'll get deported because I'll fire them. We feel great about this because we don't have to pay Americans the minimum wage. We don't have to pay Americans anything. We don't have to live to the standards of the Americans. We don't have to pay them what they want or give them the benefits they want. We can just have a permanent underclass of indentured servants that we can treat like garbage. And if they complain, then I'll fire them and they'll be gone, so they can't complain. This is the problem with the Republican Party. That's where we'll end off here today by talking about the Republican Party. The Republican Party, this decision from the Supreme Court on birthright citizenship, this was decided by Republicans nominated by Donald Trump to the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. Where was this election process for these people? Trump said since day one, since 2016, that birthright citizenship was something he wanted to have gone. He wanted to get rid of this. Okay, so this is like a major priority. If you're going to get rid of birthright citizenship in this country, this is a major priority that when you're endorsing candidates for Congress or endorsing people for the Senate or backing and nominating Supreme Court justices, when you're going through the selection process, you would have the think tanks and the people who are supposedly on our side, the Republicans, the right-wingers, you would have them scan through candidates and through possible nominations for the Supreme Court and see who would be on your side on this before you select them, before you nominate them, before you endorse them for Congress and the Senate. You would think a little bit before you do this and not just go on the most basic level of who says nice things to me. Because that's how we're operating right now. And that's what's resulted. And now we're backing Lindsey Graham. I mean, we're backing Ted Cruz. We're backing the worst of the worst. And we nominated Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, and she's just utterly toothless. She sides with the left nonstop. It's endless betrayal after betrayal. Brett Kavanaugh just sided with the liberals when it comes to birthright citizenship. Was this not considered when this was a supposed priority back in term one? Was it not considered at all where these people would side on these most important of issues like birthright citizenship in this country? These issues that the base deeply and fundamentally cares about, the valuing of citizenship, what does it mean to be an American? It was not even considered what these people would say to that. It's just sloppy. It's just sloppiness from the Republicans. These people who claim to be on your side. And even worse than, I shouldn't even say it's sloppiness. It's worse than sloppiness. It's malice in many cases. They are actively lying to you about their intentions. Let me explain. The Republicans all across the country, in state office, in different Republican states, the red states in this country, in federal government, in the House, in the Senate, in the presidency, in the executive branch, everyone who fills up the staff of DHS or ICE or any of these groups, they will constantly pander to the right-wing base and their most fundamental instincts on immigration, on mass migration, on the degradation of our society. They will pander to the most base fundamental instincts on these issues. And then when they get in office, they get a phone call. They get a phone call from the Chamber of Commerce and from the big donors, the CEOs, the big donors of all the big agriculture companies and the hotels and the car manufacturers. They get the call that stop the deportations now because you're taking away our cheap labor. It's all a scam. You need to understand it's all a scam. The Republicans run with the backing of the donors, and they campaign on this hardcore immigration restrictionist message. They campaign on it knowing full well they intend on betraying that message the minute they get into power. They know full well they aren't going to do mass deportations. They aren't going to heavily restrict the amount of H-1Bs, for example, that come into this country. We hit the cap last year for H-1Bs when this was something we were deeply concerned about in 2024. Because this is a grift. The donors back these candidates because they like their views on the Second Amendment or something. It's because they intend for these candidates to work for their interests. They don't back them because of their virtuous conservative principles. They back them because they can see, and they've been promised by those candidates that they will be good for them. They are operating based on their interests, and we are operating based on this team sport of red versus blue. We're at such a low level of understanding the game here that we think that just the words matter. The words of Stephen Miller on Fox News yesterday, after this decision was handed down, saying we're going to get right on it. We're going to heavily restrict the border. The words don't matter. Look at the numbers. The deportations have not been happening. And why is that? Because Trump, last year, beginning of 2025, said that the people called him up from the hotels and the agriculture and said it will hurt the local economy if you get rid of our workers. So stop. And Trump said, I will stop because I don't want to hurt the economy. So he stopped. He stopped like 2 months into this administration. Yet we've continued this just phony role play as if they're like these hardcore immigration restrictionists and they're getting these deportations done. And then we have to, for some reason, defend the shooting of the people in Minnesota because it's all in service of this greater goal. Number one, those situations all could have been handled much better that didn't result in the death of Americans. That's number one. Number two, it's not in service of anything. It's all fake performative violence to try and create the image that they're being hardcore and cracking down and doing deportations when they've said openly. James Blair, the deputy chief of staff, he said it openly at the House Republican Congressional Retreat. He said, stop talking about mass deportations. They are done. We're not doing them. It's unpopular. It's not good for the midterms. We're going to stop doing them. They've said this openly. All of them have. Susie Wiles said we need to redirect. We need to course correct. These are all just political diplomatic words for we're going to stop the policy. We're not doing mass deportations. So it's over. They're not doing it. We're months away from the midterms. After that, it's absolutely over. The Democrats are going to take control. You think they're going to ramp up mass deportations with a Democrat-controlled House? The Democrats being the ones who are doing the funding of ICE and Border Patrol? Of course not. So get out of this illusion. The Republicans are not serving you. They are serving the donors, and all they are doing is pandering to your base political instincts. They know what you want. They know you want immigration restricted. So they'll campaign on that, and then they'll pretend for 4 years. They'll role play as harsh as ICE officers, or Kristi Noem out there dressed as an ICE agent, pretending to be engaged in this process of taking the country back one block at a time. They aren't doing that. They aren't. They've said it openly, and you should probably just listen to what they're saying because they've said it openly. It's been leaked repeatedly from DHS, from Stephen Miller, from Kristi Noem when she was in there. So it's absolutely ridiculous. This is the complicity of the Republicans. In 1990, you have George Bush, the Immigration Act. This is what opens the floodgates to all of this. Year after year after year. It's crazy that we still would buy the narrative that they deeply care about this. It's just ridiculous. We should take the donors take their own side. The donors donate to the politicians and support them because they promise to serve them, because they promise to keep their cheap labor in the country. They promise to maintain this system of indentured servitude, which serves their interests. Why are we not supposed to play on that level as well? The people of this country want what they want, and they're not getting it. So therefore, we shouldn't support it. If the politicians of this country are not giving you what you want, then why are you under any obligation to voluntarily go vote for them or support them? Why? They aren't doing anything for you. So stop, grow some self-respect and stop supporting people who are lying to you for your vote. That's where we'll end it off for today. Supreme Court determines that birthright citizenship will be upheld. Disastrous decision, terrible decision for this country. Republicans utterly complicit in all of this. I would not hold my breath that there's going to be any challenge to this. They're not going to try and reword this or reframe this. There's 3 months to the midterms. You think there's going to be a radical change now? The time that we had was squandered. There's 3 months to the midterms. They're not going to do anything in 3 months. And now you expect after the Democrats win the House, they're going to suddenly have a radical ramping up of deportation policies? While the Democrats control the House, which funds the deportations, it's done. It's over. They squandered the opportunity, and we should stop pretending and wasting more time by pretending, and instead look to the future and try and get somebody in 2028 who actually cares about these issues and is willing to actually do something about it. But that's where we'll end it off for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to go down below this video here on YouTube and hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Have a good day.
It is about who we are. It is about what we believe.
They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become.
Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.